Hi, everybody. My name is Leah, and I work at the Queensland Parliamentary Library. So I think almost everybody here is local, so you probably know where Parliament is. But for those who don't, it's across the river up the other end of the city. And you can come and visit and do a tour of the building. I've called the talk The Public Face of a Private Collection because, unlike a lot of people here and institutions like galleries, libraries, archives, the Parliament collections themselves are not public, and they're not the main MO of the institution that we work for is not to make our collections accessible and public, because we work for the Parliamentary Service, and the primary goal of the Parliamentary Service is to support Parliament rather than us working for a library or a gallery, and the primary goal for that institution is to collect and display and preserve them. Some of our considerations using Vernon and using collections and managing our collections are different. Obviously, preservation and access of the materials that we have is still the main MO of us and our team in the library. And particularly myself, Ruth and Cecilia, we work sort of in a smaller subgroup within the library as a heritage library team. I'm going to talk today about using the Vernon Browser and adding things to the Vernon Browser, and just looking at it through the lens for us of it being the first time we've actually sort of had public collections in our institution, and some of the issues that we've encountered along the way. I'm going to talk about that issue that we have here, where we're sort of going, a private collection, what are we thinking about when we're making it public for the first time? The concern for us in the Parliamentary Service of impartiality, neutrality as a core ethic that we have. The loss of context for our collections that we've got in our heritage materials, which is not an uncommon one, I'm sure, for everybody. As we add things online, we're looking at, for the first time, some duplication of information and how we try and mitigate that. And I'm going to do a little project highlight of the oral history collection that I've just added, and then some learning curves, a couple of speed bumps that we've hit, or I've hit, during my project of starting to add more online. And then a couple of upcoming projects that I'm working on just briefly. We are a library that is private by design. So we do not have a public catalogue. We don't have our collections in trove in the library. We have a huge collection in the library. A lot of it's digital. We do a lot of news monitoring and clipping. It's all for an internal customer base. People can't come and look at our shelves. Some people can come and tour the buildings, look at some of the artworks and the heritage objects and the heritage library part of it, but there is no public aspect to what we do. The only online place you can see anything about the Parliamentary Library is under the History tab on the Parliament website, and that's specifically about the O'Donovan Library and Collection, which is a heritage listed collection and space within the old Parliament House. So we have, in the library that I work in, absolutely no public face whatsoever, which is why it is very exciting for us to be able to have Vernon, because it's the only public record of what we have. And so we can actually start to make some of our interesting, not private, not sensitive collections public, which has never been the case before. And we do have a lot of things that wouldn't be suitable to be made public, but we have a huge amount that is suitable to be made public, and we've never really had a way to do that before. So, like I said up there, anything we add to our collection is more public than it's ever been. So that's very exciting for us. One of the things that we look at now that we're starting to make more things public. So I have been there for about a year at the Parliamentary Library, a bit over a year. And this was already, the browser was already up before I started, but there wasn't very much on there. It had been a little bit of a sort of like initial project and then not much added past that. But using Vernon in the background, the library and the heritage team in the Parliament had been adding every object. So all of the furniture, there's lots of furniture, there's artworks, there's ceramics, there's silverware, there's all kinds of objects, heritage objects within Parliament itself that are being added to Vernon. But our balance is, how much do we use it as a collection manager, a heritage management service, versus how much do we use it for adding things to be made public? And we're still kind of coming up on that balance and figuring it out. But for instance, a lot of the things that we have in our collection will just have a really basic photo that's been taken of a chair, and that's just to say, this is that chair, this is where it was when we took the photo. It's not an archival picture, it doesn't look nice. We wouldn't want to make that public just because it has a picture. And similarly, we have a lot of rare books. We have a library management system, a catalogue separate that is, private and internal. Do we necessarily be wanting to add every single thing in that library catalogue onto Vernon just because we want to use it as a heritage management collection? Probably not. So with some of this stuff, we'll probably be picking and choosing what we're adding to Vernon rather than using it as a full collection management for everything we have. Just because we do already have the library catalogue. There's stuff in there we couldn't make public. It doesn't make sense for us to add everything into the catalogue into Vernon. So what we're doing, some of these things up here, for instance, are some of our interesting Queensland history stuff that, other collections we might not have seen them anywhere else. It's the only copy that we can find. We have no way of making it public with our current system. So Vernon's a great way to actually start doing that. But on the flip side, we're not going to add every single thing that we have to Vernon or the browser. So we work for the Parliamentary Service, and the Parliamentary Service it's a statutory body, which means it's outside of the state government. So we don't have a government department, we don't have a minister, we are completely self-contained. And that means that we have a very high standard for our code of conduct to be neutral and impartial in our dealings with politics. So out of our code of conduct says we must be free and be seen to be free from undue or improper political considerations in making operational decisions and taking actions. And internally, we definitely follow these guidelines. So as we have our heritage collections on display internally, we're always making sure if we're doing a display that deals with any kind of political angle, you're not taking just from one side of politics or from one party, you're taking from all sides or all parties or both sides or whatever your topic might be. If we're collecting in the library, we're collecting from all sides of politics. We're not just focusing on one party. If we're doing internal newsletter alerts, we're doing the same thing. So we're very, very considerate about, very conscious about maintaining a balance and being seen to maintain a balance. So now that we are adding a lot of things or starting to add more things that are less passive to our online collections, this is a consideration that we'll keep running up against. So for instance, if we got a donation from someone who'd been a lifelong member of the Labor Party and they had a lot of photos and they had a lot of documents, we would not necessarily just be able to put that straight up on Vernon and make a highlight of it because we wouldn't have anything to balance it out from, let's say, a member of the Liberal Party or, a different side of politics. So we could add it to our collections. Could we highlight it? Probably not. Or would we, we would have to have those sorts of conversations. And that picture up there that I've got, so we have a collection of portraits in Parliament. That's every former Premier is entitled to get their portrait painted, and that goes into the Parliament collection. Recently unveiled the most recent portrait of Anastasia Palaszczuk, who was a Labor Party leader. And then we had this little internal discussion of, is it okay for us to make that the highlight image on the front page of Vernon? And it's a small discussion, but it's still a discussion that we had to have because our current government's no longer a Labor government, although we would still have had that discussion if it was, because you're still going on one side or the other. And we did decide at the end of the day, it's fine because the collection itself, we just put it in reverse order. So most recent Premier makes sense to have it on the front page. From a collection management point of view, I quite wanted to have a more modern artwork on the front page. I quite wanted to have a picture of a woman on the front page. It's quite uncommon in our collection. A lot of our collection is just pictures of old white men. As it just is, that's just how history has gone. But from that angle, and if I had been in a different collection, it probably wouldn't have even been that much of a consideration. But it's just another one of those things that we kind of just had to think about. Does this make sense? Could we defend it from a neutrality perspective? And we decided we could, but we're just going to keep having these conversations. As we are in the library, part of a larger institution, we've dealt over the years with different areas of Parliament, collecting stuff, gathering things, keeping them in boxes. And then one day someone will say, oh, here you go. Here's something for the library. And that will be it. We will have absolutely no information about where it's come from, why it was there in the first place, who gave it to that person, who's in the picture, if it's a picture, what the document's about, if it's a document. So we have, quite a lot of that, and I'm sure everybody does. But now that we're starting to add these things online again, and I'm keen to get more photos, especially online. I think it just sort of makes the collection more interesting. But so everything up on there, for instance, comes from a collection that we've called Photographs Donated to the Table Office, because the Table Office in Parliament had a box of photos and then they gave them to us, and that is all we know about it. So we have no idea why they were at the Table Office. Were they considered for tabling in Parliament? Did a member just give it to them? Did they just get it from some staff member internally. Absolutely no idea. We don't know who they are. We're sometimes able to figure it out. Sometimes it's handwritten on the back. Don't know who wrote it on the back. Was it at the time? Was it later? No idea. But these are the sorts of things where I have the sort of luxury at the moment of being able to go through these and do a little bit of research on each of them and try and figure it out, because I really want to enhance the online collections and make these things look better and make it more valuable as an information source as well. Another example, and I'll talk a little bit about the oral history collection, but that oral history collection was made by Parliament. It was commissioned by Parliament. It was interviews with MPs. It was fully done in-house, and then it was just sat on for 10 years. It sat on hard drives and discs and boxes of paper. And by the time we actually got it and got to upload it, the consent forms that were obviously discussed in the interviews themselves were nowhere to be found. They weren't kept with the documents. They weren't kept with the audio files. So it's the sort of thing where it's just been handed from department to department, and we've had to gather it in and do what we can from an information standpoint. As I said, this is the first time we've ever actually had anything online in our collections. And while the person records, for instance, in Vernon are an amazing way to link all of the subjects together of a picture, or the artists if they're the creators, we were finding that as we created person records for members of Parliament, we were actually duplicating information that already exists on the Parliament website. So this is not the library itself, although the library does handle that former members' information, but that's a resource that already exists. It's completely kept up by Parliament and the website. So rather than adding that information again into Vernon, publishing it, replicating it, sometimes rewriting it and adding extra stuff to it, which would then become public and look like two official sources of information that were different, we made the blanket decision to, if the person record is a member of Parliament, we have no biographical information beyond their name and their date of birth, just for identification purposes. And in the back end, we've got a user symbolic that creates public web links to the former members database. So every person who is a member of Parliament or was a member of Parliament has a record already on Parliament website. We've created a user symbolic, goes into the person record, just becomes a public web link. And that's just a blanket, simple way for us to keep it straightforward, less worrying about duplication. We still use the person records a ton for artists, for photographers, creators, and if there isn't an official Parliament source, we can put a bit of biographical information in there. That's useful. But for members of Parliament, rather than just totally duplicating things again and making it confusing from a public perspective, we've just said nothing. So this collection, like I said, it was a internal Parliament commission. So in 2009, which was the 150th anniversary of Parliament in Queensland, the speaker at the time requested a researcher to do a big oral history collection. And the project went for about 5 years. We ended up with 24 interviews with about an hour each, with a lot of former members of Parliament about their experiences of Parliament over the later 20th century. And that was the goal, was to try and collect memories of Parliament and its working in the more recent history rather than just the older history that we already have. And that kicked around Parliament for 10 years in boxes on hard drives like that one, until sadly the interviewer who created those interviews passed away recently. And that suddenly sort of kicked our boss into gear to actually say, oh, we should have done, the goal was always to publish them, but they just never actually came around to doing it. So suddenly this became a big priority. Let's get these out online. Let's actually make them public. And I had a click around, found another Vernon collection that had done it already. And so I got in touch with Vernon and said, is this possible? What do we have to do? And it was pretty straightforward. For me, in doing all these projects, it has given me a huge amount more background and like learning of Vernon and how it all works. And it's made me better at Vernon by going through all of this. So the first thing, for instance, was we have to create a SoundCloud. So Vernon doesn't have its own internal AV hosting, which makes sense. It's a totally separate type of service. But in order to host an audio or video, anything like that, you have to already host it somewhere else. So created a SoundCloud, uploaded all the audio to that, did the metadata for that. We're very lucky in Parliament. We've got a Hansard service. It's fully internal, and they had done perfect transcription of every single one of those oral history interviews, and they were beautifully laid out. So we have those PDFs. They're also part of the records. And I have the audio files attached in Vernon, but that's not how they get onto the public side. The public side is a link to SoundCloud. So we created SoundCloud and then User Symbolics again to do the actual hosting of that. And then the last one's just this is one of my learning curves of the embedding code. It's not just your straight link to SoundCloud. It's actually just a small part of the embedded code that you get from SoundCloud to actually make it public. So it was finicky to get a start on. And once you get a handle on it, you just kind of do it over and over again. But that has resulted in, a really nice record that looks like that. And it's easily replicatable. It's really straightforward. It's like a nice experience. The Clerk of Parliament has spoken about it very positively. He's been listening to them. He really likes the outcome. So it's a really positive project for us. And it was nice for us to for it to be so simple to turn Vernon from something which was just pictures and, artwork and photos into a more of an online experience like this, which is basically just something that's born digital and onto the internet. With all of that said, and with me having sort of been adding a lot of these things, a couple of the learning curves or the speed bumps that I've hit, and that's, I don't know if, and other people might have had this, I'd be really interested to chat later about it. So when you're using the browser side, you're logging into what looks like basically like a CMS for a website. And I have, in my other roles, have worked with CMSs and done heritage projects online. And I kind of butt up against sometimes the fact that it looks a lot like a CMS, but it is not entirely the same as a CMS. It's kind of a portal for Vernon, which is such a powerful program, but you're kind of like half in Vernon, half in the browser, and in the browser admin side as well. And then some of those things carry over, like, so you don't have a huge amount of control over the layout, or if you wanted to change something or add a field, a lot of it you have to go to our wonderful hosts. But it's a little bit different too if you're used to working with a CMS yourself, that you can just sort of do those things and try them out and move things around and change things. Complexities with updating stuff from Vernon into the browser. For instance, if you update a person record, you have to update an object record attached to it, so they're like subjugated. the person record is secondary to the object record, so things like that, which you have to get used to. You have to figure it out. If something's going wrong, maybe you have to update the object and try again. And something like the caching issues as well, I found it does do that a little bit. If you have not updated every object related to a person, it will only update some of them, and then the other ones will stay the same. The cache also kind of relates to the saved lists that I struggle with sometimes, with the highlights as well. If you're creating a highlight from a saved list, there's a few roadblocks with those, and then the move up and the move down functions there, which I know is on the list of things to be changed. I don't know if anyone else has had these experiences. Anyway, those are some of the things that I kind of hit up against as frustrations while I'm doing it. A lot of it is just learning curves and figuring it out. And like I said, for us, it's really important because it's the only public face we have. So some of these things, I really want this list to be in the right order, because there is nowhere else for anyone to go to see this. There's nowhere else for someone to go and look at our website. We don't have an online presence whatsoever as a heritage collection. This is the only place they can go. So it's important to us for it to be gotten right, basically. And then the help pages, the actual Vernon help pages are so incredibly in depth, and I find sometimes you run up against the browser ones, they're quite basic in comparison. So a couple of future projects I've got going in the pipeline. Like I said, I really want to get more photos of people. We've got this great collection from the royal visit in 1953, 54, of the Queen and lots of different politicians in Brisbane. My colleague Ruth over there is always taking more photos of artworks in the collection. If they're getting hung, then we will go and take a photo of them. They get moved around a lot. Sometimes they're in storage. So if they come out of storage to get hung, Ruth goes and takes a photo of them. So we're always kind of slowly updating that collection to get more actual artworks online as well. They're not in the library, they're in the building, and they're managed by another team. So we're sort of crossing over all the time. And then the last one, I've done a mock-up. This isn't actually in Vernon, but I'm doing a mock-up of it. So it's already doable. It'll be an object record. So what we would really like to do is create audio tours and like building tours, which are already done physically by Parliament attendants, but we would like to be able to create them in Vernon. So each room, let's say, is an object record, and then you'll have an audio tour, which we can add with the SoundCloud. We'll have all the objects that live in that room. So some examples there, like the chair or the coat of arms or the mace, which would already be in Vernon. Then we can just relate them to this room object as related records. And then the long-term goal will be to have a board up in each of the rooms, and then someone can scan a QR code and go straight to this record. And then that will give them the history of the room, the objects inside the room and the audio tour itself. And that's a little bit of a project we're doing with somebody from Vision Australia. So it's part of an accessibility project as well, which, an audio tour would be helpful for that. And it will also just broaden the audience of the tours. If you cannot physically be in Brisbane, at least you can actually tour the building to an extent and do a little bit more than nothing, which is what you can currently do.